Washington Post is reporting this morning on the president's missed, perhaps ignored warning signs of just how serious the coronavirus was getting. Current and former U.S. officials tell the Washington Post intelligence agencies prepared warnings about coronavirus in more than a dozen of the president's classified briefings. This was back in January and February when he was still downplaying that threat. Sources tell the paper that for weeks the president's daily brief traced the spread of the virus around the world, warned that China was suppressing information, and warned about the political and economic consequences. An official with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is responsible for the presidential daily brief, tells the Post, quote, "The details of this story not true," but declined to elaborate. A reminder of what the president was saying about the virus around the time he would have been getting these daily briefings. On January 22nd, he told CNBC he's not worried at all. Quote, "We have it totally under control. It's going to be fine." 2 days later, talking about China's efforts to contain the virus and talking about its transparency, the president tweeted, "It will all work out well." On February 19th, he told the Phoenix news station, "I think the numbers are going to get progressively better as we go along." On February 26th, he said from the White House, "We're going substantially down, not up." A day later, he claimed the virus famously would disappear like a miracle. We know weeks later is when cases of coronavirus began to spike. As the Post points out, the intel warnings did not register with the president. Officials tell the paper he takes an oral summary of the daily press briefing 2 or 3 times a week and even shows little patience for that. Past presidents have received documents intended to be read. So, Joe, this is obviously the president at the end of January put in that limited travel restriction on China. He would say that's how he addressed this briefing. But my goodness, if you look through more than a dozen instances of the intelligence community waving the flag and sounding the alarm.
Well, and even that, of course, so-called ban was toothless. 430,000 people came to America from China from the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak. And even after that toothless ban was put in place, 40,000 more people came from China to America because he had so many exceptions. But John Meacham, this president has always infamously been incapable of ingesting any information from his briefers. They tried to keep it simple. We've read one story after another about how they had to dumb it down, keep it simple, try to keep the briefings on one page, and then they found out he couldn't even maintain attention during that one-page briefing unless they put his name in the briefing a lot. Then they tried to go to oral briefings. It was the same thing. And so you look historically, and yes, there's the question, did FDR miss the warning signs about Pearl Harbor in 1941? Did George W. Bush miss the warning signs about 9/11 in 2001? Well, here we are in 2020, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 warning signs. The lights were blinking throughout the month of January, with even Navarro writing a memo to him saying up to 500,000 people could die. And then in February, he started talking about how it could cost millions of lives and trillions of dollars to our economy. This president, in the coming months, still remained oblivious to the threat.
Yeah. Where the analogy fails, of course, is Pearl Harbor, 9/11 were singular attacks that took place at a particular moment in time. This is a rapidly moving, unfolding phenomena that if you had an interest in the post-Enlightenment world, if you were interested in what the scientific revolution had wrought, if you were interested in the insight of the American Revolution, which was that reason would take a stand against passion in the arena of human affairs to try to allow us to use our brains instead of our guts to actually move the human story forward. If you had even a nodding interest in any of those three things, then you might have paid more attention. And it's a willful thing. I do think that it's childlike. It's not. That's unfair to children. It's adolescent.
It is.
It's a refusal to accept an inconvenient fact, and we're all living with his incapacity to confront reality that may not conform to the flattering mirror that he wishes to perpetually hold in front of him.
So, John, let me ask you a question. We don't know the answer to it now, but how will historians sort through this 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now in assessing blame? Obviously, China was primarily responsible for this virus spreading across the globe. But Donald Trump's administration started getting warnings at the end of December of 2019. It warned him. Everybody, the administration started warning him in January. You had, again, the CDC, the FDA, the State Department, the Pentagon, the National Security Council, Department of HHS. When Azar could finally talk to him on the 18th of January, he didn't want to talk about the coronavirus. Instead, he wanted to talk about flavored vaping and when Azar would allow it to be used again. End of February, he became enraged. In February, when an official said that this could be a pandemic and it could hurt the economy. And so he didn't want to hear the truth in January and February. So here we are, coming up on 60,000 deaths. Who knows where this is going to end if we have an outbreak in the fall? How are historians going to assess the blame of those deaths? And what responsibility will this president bear in history's eyes?
Well, there are only two ways. There are two main ways where history is written in a way that's more surprising than what your intuition would tell you right now. So those two ways are: one is the narrative changes. There's new information that suggests that the A to B to C chronology of what's unfolded has happened. Very unlikely that could conceivably happen because we have his public statements, we have the course of the virus. Those are two immutable facts. The second way history can change is if the impact of a decision that was not popular in real time turns out to be right. Truman and the Cold War, George H.W. Bush, and no new taxes. Pick your decision where something was hard in real time, but in the end, history decided, Ford and the pardon, decides that, well, that was the right thing, and then the story changes. Immutable fact is there's nothing about the president's decisions that can change the fact that, as you pointed out, we will today pass the American casualty fatality numbers in the Vietnam War. So that to me, it's impossible to see. It's very unlikely to see how this story changes of Trump being willfully obtuse and now so narcissistically engaged in his own drama that he's failing to do what my Springer Spaniels know we should do, which is launch a Marshall Plan for testing to actually reopen the economy and regain the sense of an American ethos of being together. So
well, Willie
it seems to me that
with your Springer Spaniels,
and
we can confirm that.
Good. They enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, in terms of that Vietnam War marker, did y'all hear that the daily briefings were canceled? Oh, wait, they weren't. That the president held this hastily put together briefing yesterday and couldn't stay away from it, but yet did not take one moment to really look at the magnitude of death and destruction that this virus has caused and to perhaps honor that number, those people, those human beings who have passed away in the middle of this human catastrophe.
Well, he read
a
few lines that some people wrote him, obviously, but not much.
Come on. We'll get to that, whatever that was, in just a moment. The Washington Post has reported in the past about Trump and the intel briefings. Back in 2018, 3 people familiar with the matter told the Post that during the first year of the Trump presidency, the format of his intelligence briefings changed. Early in the administration, the president's public schedules showed he received the traditional briefings sometime between 9 and 10:30 a.m. Within a few months, his intelligence advisors began augmenting the sessions with maps, charts, pictures, and videos, as well as, quote, killer graphics, as then Intel Chief Mike Pompeo put it at the time. According to the Post, quote, several intelligence experts said that the president's aversion to diving deeper into written intelligence details, the homework that past presidents have done to familiarize themselves with foreign policy and national security, makes both him and the country more vulnerable. Just like the wacky concept of disinfectant that he grabbed onto, his brain grabbed onto the concept right before the briefing last Thursday, and he began to spew it out to the American people.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.